High Sheriff, it was interesting hearing from the High Sheriff of Bucks. I love her idea of college champions. I thought that was really sits so well with what we do. And then she said, accept me as I am, not what you want me to be. And as women, there was a business network I went to. And one of the slides for that was that if you imagine a clock face, then half of your clock face, or you decide when your number 6 comes, you are the person that other people are telling you to be. So at some point, you get to the point on the clock face where you say, I'm going to be what I'm going to be. And I think when you look at women throughout the world, some women never get to that point where they can be the person they want to be. So that was, it's always lovely listening to other speakers and getting ideas. The Violet Awards, well, that's given me ideas buzzing around in my head, and we really need to be making much of that. I don't know about the rest of you, but listening to what Milton Keynes are doing, in my club role, I feel really inadequate. But actually, it's about going out there and seeing what we can do in our own way. But a project like that, this is where the hub is so powerful, because all that information will be put on the hub and we don't have to do the background work. Milton Keynes have done it for us. So the forms are there, the prototype is there, which would be fantastic. So I'm here today as Director of Membership, and it's a rota visit, so I'm supposed to bring slides, but I haven't, because I don't like slides. I don't like worrying about technology. So the main bit about the SIGB presentation is that the challenges that we came across or we're currently facing, and those were when I started at the board last year, so I'm about 18 months in. And one of the challenges for us new directors was not only did we do our director's role, and dare I mention it, we had to do the modernisation plan as well. Just don't boo and hiss at me just yet. So it was a double whammy. But also, we're dealing with information technology in a way that we've never had to before. A hybrid meeting, it sounds brilliant, and it's brilliant you can do this. But actually, technically, in a club, it's very difficult to do, depending on your venue. So although we want to do it, it's hard. We've got increasingly busy lives. Women have got increasingly busy lives. But I think that that says something about us. I had a busy life. It might have been different from the women of today, but I had a busy life. So a busy life, you know, the old thing about if you want something done, ask a busy woman. And that's us really, isn't it, as optimists? Bureaucracy, that's a huge area that we've worked on. And then how to engage and inspire women to join us. Now, you're not telling me that if we'd had visitors here today, that they wouldn't at the end of the afternoon, before me, of course, be saying, we'd like to be optimists actually, because we like what you do. So I think it's sharing the best of us at every opportunity. And Lindsay and I, we never speak without referring to the other. So program action and membership are very closely tied together. It's the work that we do that makes us stand out from other groups. And it's the way that we report it that makes us stand out from other groups. If we don't report it, it hasn't happened. And I think the extra bit that Lindsay brought to the table, well, there were two things. When we were looking at the modernisation plan, she brought pages of where the programme director has to be accountable. And it starts at the UN and it goes right the way down to a club member. The committees that are on there are unbelievable. We didn't know that the programme director went to those committees until Lindsay put it all on a big sheet of paper and then said, help, I can't do all of it myself. So that's a huge role. And the other thing that Lindsay has sort of added in, I've always said, you know, if you're raising funds, make sure that you on your reporting can link it to a number of women. So if you're giving money to a refuge and you give them £100, we can't count it. Well, it's money, but that's not what we're about. But if you give them 10 starter packs, you've helped 10 women. The bit that Lindsay has added on for me is the volunteer hours. Because if you're doing 10 welcome packs for the refuge, it's the time you've taken to go and buy them, fetch them, pack them, deliver them. And the volunteer hours, if you start adding them up, are huge. And we need to celebrate those. So I hope Lindsay will be pleased that I've sort of given her a message as well. So for me, starting on the board, in the past, you had to go through lots of layers. So you had to be club president, region president, FCC, all of those things. And I have done the region bit. But now a club member can apply to be a director on the board. And I think that's a huge, huge positive. So I've gone from club member to the board. I must admit it was a bit of a shock because board stuff is complicated. I think President Ruth, she was finance director, despaired of me once or twice when she was going through accounts. And I said, well, I don't quite get it. Shall I abstain? And she said, no, you won't. And she made me go through the whole thing, which is our responsibility. So it opens up the board to people like me and Chris and Lindsay, who are deeply rooted in their club. They haven't gone so far distant from that they've forgotten the chuntering that they've done as club members. And, you know, when you think about when the applications come for directors and you go to a meeting and I remember going to a meeting and Chris was there as well, where we looked and said, does anybody know these women? And somebody said, I met this one at conference once and we voted for them because that was, we didn't know anything else. So I think now, because of the way the interview process is, and we all had to do those wretched videos. So if you hadn't met us, at least you got a bit of an idea of us bumbling through our videos. And my video was 2 minutes, 7 seconds, and you're only allowed 2 minutes. And Gina sent it back. And I said, but it's only 7 seconds, Gina. And she said, but that gives you an unfair advantage. So I'm not good at editing. I think I just cut the goodbye off. And so that was that. But as a team, you know I stand in front of very, very experienced members, board members who've given service to SIGB over the years. I think it is a time of change, but that's not saying anything about how it's been in the past. Because one of the things that we're very clear on is that if people like you and I hadn't stepped up to do those roles, if people like you and I, long-standing members, hadn't stuck with Sir Optimus, there would be no federation. So I think there's a big pat on the back for us there. So the way the board is working is very much a team action. I hope that the FCCs that came to the last, your FCC, if they came to the last meeting, saw open discussion during those meetings. You know, it isn't when we give our reports, it's not a done deal. Directors ask you stuff. And very much in this membership role, I really appreciate that the directors say, yeah, but that won't work, will it? And why don't you think about this? And that is really, really important. So we're not working in silos. We're actually working as a team. And that's very positive because none of us have all the answers, but hopefully if we all get together and chip in, we'll be okay. We've had to bring speedy change. There's been no choice. You've seen the numbers that Anne has shown. We've got just over 5,000 members, but the ones that Anne has shown us are the ones that are UK based. And so we're looking at what, 4,500 members. Now, Jane, I don't know whether you remember how many members there were when you were on the board, but the numbers have gone down drastically.
Well, we lost Africa as well.
Yes, yes, there is that as well. So the African Federation, but actually we're losing members faster than we can sustain. And so we really have to expand. And then the other bit that's changed is the speed of response. Now, I know the hub has people who like it and people who hate it, but what it does do is that all of the information is available to everybody. Every member will get to hear what's been sent out. And that's really important because in the past, the cascade system hasn't always been successful. I'll come back to that. So when we were looking at how we were going to work with membership, what I found out later, I didn't know I was doing it, but apparently it's organizational change, which sounds really posh. So it's nice to put a name to it. But what we have to do as an organization is we have to look after members like me, who've been a Soroptimist for many years and getting to the other end of the spectrum. And we need to value us Soroptimists, because as a member, I got really fed up of going to meetings where we were told, we've got to get new members, we've got to get younger members. And I remember sitting there saying, well, what about me? You know, I'm still working hard and doing my bit. And so we need to value the work that they do. And your region membership officers, when I met with them the last 2 meetings, have had some really, really good ideas about how we can value our members and show our thanks, because we're not great at it. You know, there's an expectation that you will just do this, but somebody needs to go back and say, thank you. And what you did was appreciated. And we need to celebrate. So every small action is significant. And so sometimes we think, well, it's only a small thing, but actually it's quite a big thing if you make that difference. So if I go to the Diamond Education Grant, and I'm really lucky that Anne is on the board, because as you've heard, my financial knowledge is not great. So Anne's training me as well. But one of the grants we made last year was a girl called Saoirse, that this was before Anne came onto the board. And she was an alcoholic at 27. And her life had fallen apart at the point where she saw her brother die in a road traffic accident. She was a teenager. Her life went completely downhill, and she ended up drinking. And then the change came when she drove her car into a tree, survived it, but she was 4 times over the limit when she was breathalyzed. They immediately put her into rehab, and from that moment, her life changed. She applied to the Diamond Education Grant because she's a writer, she's a blogger, and she was getting articles into the magazines. And she said she wanted to write her story because she wanted to be able to help other people in the same position. She's had a grant. This year, she's writing her story. And I have everything crossed that at Edinburgh Conference, she's going to come with her book for all of you to be able to read her story. Now that's just one girl who's 27. Now add that up to all the 1 girls that you've worked with, the 3 girls that came and sang for us. Amazing. We have to remember those stories. So bring your money, because we'll be selling Saoirse's books, I hope. She said, I spoke to her writing coach, and her writing coach said, it's very explicit, Dishy. It's very raw. It might make Soroptimist's hair curl. And I said, well, that's a reason for us to buy it then, isn't it? But do you know, there isn't a story that we as Soroptimists haven't heard. We're the listeners to all the things that happen to women and girls. and how we can help. And the High Sheriff talked about racial abuse and harassment. And all of us, I mean, Sue, you could hardly say your vote of thanks, because no person should have to go through it, and no woman should have to go through it. So these are the stories that we need to tell. So once I took on this role, I suddenly realized that actually women aren't knocking on our door saying, hello, I want to be a Soroptimist. In fact, most of them didn't know we exist or where we are or anything. So I decided, well, I took advice, and I was told that one of the places to find women is on LinkedIn. So I then took training on LinkedIn, thinking this was before I went into role, because I thought I'd better hit the ground running. It's up to you, Dishy, to save this organisation by increasing membership. Yeah, it's a tall order, isn't it? So I had a power hour of training on LinkedIn, which is usually enough for most people. I had six power hours. And by the end, the trainer was getting quite frustrated and said, surely you get it now. And from that, there were things like homework where I had to connect with 5 women before my next session. So I had to look at their profiles, look at where they were, look at where they lived, and I was doing it in my geographic area. And so then, so I was really pleased I'd done my homework, you know, I've connected with these women. And then he said, right, now you've got to go where they hang out and say to them, hi, here I am, and I've linked with you on LinkedIn. And where they hang out are the business networks. So when we as Soroptimists took our eye off the ball about getting new members, and entrepreneurial women realized there was a gap in the market for women in work to network, and they took over. And some of them are even making money out of it. And so the business networks are where a lot of the women hang out. I tried several. There were some mixed ones. The men tended to be a little bit pompous and taller than me. So, and sort of saying, what's that old Indian woman doing over there? So I would go up to them and say, hello, and what's your business? And one young man sort of said, I'm a mortgage provider. And I said, well, I'm absolutely no use to you then, and went off. So a lot of differences. And the other thing that came up was you have to speak up at these business networks. So you turn up, you ring them up and you say, can I come to your meeting? And some of them have a 1-seat policy. Now, does that ring a bell with us ancient Soroptimists, including myself? You know, what category are you? You know, and oh, we've already got one of those. You can't possibly join. So some of these networks have the 1-seat policy. So they only have one photographer, one this and one that. So they'd say, what's your category? Or what's your business? And I'd say, I'm a Soroptimist. And they'd say, well, you can come because we've never heard of one of those. So you can go to any business network and you'll get in because they haven't got one. So I started turning up. And one of the most awful things about it is that you stand, when you arrive, either you stand in some of them or you're sitting at tables and you have to go around and introduce yourself. And so I would be sitting there and somebody would say, hi, I'm Lucy. I'm a jeweler. Job done. I know her name's Lucy. I know she's a jeweler. If I want some jewelry, I'll go and see her. Hi, I'm Di with a Y. I'm a photographer, but I don't do weddings and babies. I know exactly when I go to Di with a Y. I can't say, hi, I'm Dishy, because I said that when I took my son to a birthday party and into this great big house. We lived in a small house and the lady of the house answered the door and I said, hi, Dishy. It's my name, not a description. And my son has never forgiven me for that. So when it comes to my turn, I have to say, my name is Dishy. And they go, ooh, yeah. And I'm a Soroptimist. And they go, what? So I just have to say, see me later, you know, because if you've got 7 seconds, that's about as much as you can say. So I had to learn how this thing worked. and what they were there for. And the thing about it is, and we were talking about it a little bit with reference to talking to Sue, because I said, you know, with all this work Milton Keynes do, why aren't they a membership of 50? And it's about timing. And so all these businesses know when they connect, they're not there selling their product. They're selling themselves as people. And it's the know, you get to know somebody, you get to like somebody, you get to trust somebody, you buy from them. And that's very much what our strategy needs to be for Sir Optimus. People need to get to know us and then over time say, actually, I'd quite like to know a bit more. So gone are the days when a visitor comes to an event and the whole club surround them and say, who are you? Where do you live? And are you going to join our club? Because it doesn't work like that. So it's a slower process. You have to really take your time. So know, like, trust. And the other thing that I did was that when I met women where I didn't know which club to send them to for whatever reason, I recruited them as associates. Be an associate while I think about where you can go. And as a result of one, you know, some of these associates, we've actually got clubs. And the associates, I've been meeting with them monthly, either 4 to 6 weeks since I started. And I said to them, the amazing work that associates do. And I said to them, would you like to be a virtual club? Because there are my regulars now who come to these meetings. And they said, no, we don't want to be a virtual club because we're associates, because we need our independence because of the situation in our lives. We can't commit to something, but we want to be Sir Optimus. So they don't want to be a virtual club. But I met Jean from Scotland, who's always come to my meetings, and I met her in person. Jean Campbell, many of you will know her. And I'd only met her on Zoom. And when I met her in Aberdeen, it was like meeting a very old friend. We were absolutely, so when you're looking at virtual clubs, you do build those relationships. And virtual clubs do try and have a once a year where they meet up. So then we got to the point of, okay, well, I found some women, we better start, maybe I can start a couple of clubs. And then you look at the chartering process, all 24 pages of it. So you have to work out the demographics of your area. You have to look at where the women are and what they're doing and where you can find them. And you have to report on all this before you ever get the nod from SIGB to say, yes, well, yes, you could give it a go. And I talked at length to Liz Batten, who set up, previous Federation president, who set up Salisbury. And she said that it took so long that some of the original members gave up and said, oh, we can't be bothered with this. You know, we found other things to do. So we looked at the membership process. You can now charter in 3 months. So from the point where you've got your 8, in fact, doesn't even, you know, well, getting your 8 women, you only need 8 women to start a club. 3 months later, you can charter. You can just do one project. Nobody's asking for your business meeting notes. What they're asking for is what action you're going to do. What's your project? You can just have one project. And so the bit that happened then was I met 2 amazing women through this process. And one of them, Catherine, set up SI Leamington last year, and Sally B set up SI Shakespeare, which is a second club in Stratford. I'm in the original club in Stratford. We have a second one called Shakespeare. And those of you at conference last year met them. Were many of you at conference? Weren't they an absolutely mad group? Honestly, you just look at them and you think, oh my word. So I've been attending 3 club meetings a month. Shakespeare, Leamington, and my own Stratford club. Because what is clear is that if a new club starts, they need a Sir Optimist to be there for a year, year and a half. Just because there are some things that aren't negotiable. Our objects are not negotiable. So we're working for women and girls. That's it. And we can do projects with young men. Lichfield do one with young footballers where they talk about respect for women. So that session is about healthy relationships. So yes, it does count, because for every one of those young men, there's a mother, there's a sister, there's a girlfriend, and you're making a difference. So it's a little bit about spin as well. You have to sort of say it in the right way. But our majority is about women and girls, and these clubs need to understand that from the get-go. Some of us in established clubs, we've been supporting charities just because we always do. And I think we need to look at them and say, do they fit our objects? Because it's only if they fit those objects that the UN is interested in them. If we don't do enough work for women and girls, we'll lose our consultative status. Because I didn't realize we lost our status with the World Health Organization because we weren't doing enough projects on health. But I didn't know that till after we'd lost the status. And nobody sort of banged a drum and said, can you all do health stuff? So it's really about making the clubs work for you. So whatever your club is, whatever your project is, it must work for you. So it's not one size fits all. What we then put in was the flexibility, that you don't need a whole string of officers. You just need, some women who are happy to get together and do some leading. Some of us, during my Sir Optimist years, there have been times when I was good for nothing. Things were happening at home and I couldn't even walk out the front door, let alone do any giving to anybody else. Well, that's when your Sir Optimist Club supports you. And then when you're back up to speed, you say, my goodness, I'm going to work even harder now because they've carried me for 2 years. The Sir Optimist relationship between each other is the most valuable thing we have. It's very different from any other relationship between women. The downside of it is that some of us are not behaving terribly well. And we're still hearing of members leaving because of the behavior of other club members. And that's really, really sad to hear. If you're sitting around a table and your discussion is about what action you're going to take to help women and girls, where do you find the time to make snarky remarks or roll your eyes at anybody or tut at anybody? You haven't. If you're focused on your Sir Optimist goals, that's all you have time for. And my goodness, is there a job out there to do? When the High Sheriff says, even through, her experience, the awful stuff she went through throughout her life, even in the workplace. Well, there are a lot of women and girls that are going through that today. And those are the things that we ought to be concentrating on. So, shortened charter process. We've looked at types of clubs. So you can have a club that just does one project as long as it's women and girls. So none of this 3 projects, 3 outcomes you've got to do. Your charter, Sally B at Shakespeare, Sir Optimist, I said, well, you've got enough now. You could charter. And she said, well, we could do it week on Monday. Week on Monday? I said, it could take 15 months to charter. I said, oh no, it'll be all right, Dishy, trust me. I hate it when people say that. Anyway, a week on Monday, the invitations had all gone out. It was in Stratford, in a hotel. There was a welcome drink. All the new members were there. Kathy Cottridge was there to charter the club. They all stood and introduced themselves and said what they wanted to do as their first project. Kathy gave them the badges and they'd got a room full of local people from Stratford, business people. So it was a network meeting. So once we'd had a drink and they'd had their badges, they then mingled and they had a little pledge envelope. So they asked people, so you could either pledge money, but the main pledge was, will you promise to go away and tell 5 women about Sir Optimus? That's the pledge we want, so more people will know about us. And blimey, week on Monday, we had the charter and it was very successful. So that was that really. So it's about, I think what we've done is we've sat back and waited for women to come to us. They're not coming. Not unless you go out, we go out and find them. So as a result of those work I did, so I've recruited to Barnstable Club because I met somebody in Solihull down the road from me. So I just go around talking about being a Sir Optimist and and letting people know and putting them in, making the connections. But it's really important that we take ourselves out of our comfort zone and go to where the women are. And to get the women to engage with you, you need your stories. And it's that Saoirse story. Didn't that make you feel, wow, you know, and we've all got those stories. Now, to help us, we've been saying for a long time, or we've been, as clubs, we all do our raising our profile in clubs. What's the board doing? Well, the board has now taken on a PR agency, and they're going to work with us for 12 months in the first instance, but with the opportunity to make it 24 if they do the job that we want them to do. And their main job is to get our brand out there, the Soroptimist brand. Because when I talk to women, whoever I've talked to, and I talk to loads on the train, on the bus, in the cafe, I can't help myself really. When I talk to them, when I describe our Soroptimist brand, they all buy into it. Every single one of them says, wow. And so what's stopping us is how we're behaving in a club. So if somebody comes to the club, they've got to feel that that energy is there and that they have something to offer. And I know Summer's here as a young member, and I have a complaint because I've tried to connect with young members and they won't connect with me. So maybe I'm just too old. So
Me and I'm older than you.
or might not be. So I think it's about, you know, younger members, yes, but it is about like-minded women. It doesn't matter what age they are, like-minded who want to do this. So the PR company will start working with us, and hopefully that'll give us, what they're wanting to do is give us key messages that we all put out there. Because if you look at websites and Facebook and Instagram, it's a mishmash. You know, we're talking about so many different things that people, when they're looking at it, can't see where our focus is. So that's what we're going to try and do. And one of the things that I also learned was, you know, recruiting to the brand was very much what I learned from going to the business networks. I also learned that we're in sales. You know, we have to sell what we have, but it's got to be accurate. You know, there's no point me dancing up and down and saying, oh, come to the club, you know, it's wonderful. And then it's a business meeting that takes an hour and a half and then half an hour on the stuff that might be interesting. We've got to look at ourselves as well. And I was told that we were an echo chamber. So all our Facebook posts, and I know because I am on Facebook, we Soroptimists tell Soroptimists what Soroptimists have been doing. Well, we already know. So you know, you don't want to see those 100 times. And I think the other thing is that when you're talking about projects, you can use any project. On the hub are all the projects. After the conference where the mangroves were talked about, I talked about mangroves everywhere. And I did did you know that mangroves can turn a force 5 hurricane into a force 3? And people say, oh, it's really interesting, Dishy. Yeah, we'll just go back to our conversation. But it's any project that you're interested in counts. I'm going to be talking about the awards, the Violet Awards. I'm going to be talking about the give and take that's been done with the Ukrainians. You know, because you've supported them, they want to give back today. And they were so proud to give back today. That's huge, absolutely huge. And that brings me to the point where we're very good at giving. We're not good at asking back. So yes, we'll give you stuff. Isn't that great? But actually, why won't you do something for us? We need members. Who have you got that be interested in joining us? So we've really got to make it into a partnership which is both-sided. And the other phrases somebody was speaking and they said most people on their social media use the spray and pray approach, but actually you should land and expand. So what you put in there should be something that's so interests people that they'll come back to you and say, can I know a bit more? Now, what a very favourite speaker that I found was a lady called Jules White, who's done TED Talks and things, and she went to Dragon's Den with a project and got funding, which was all amazing until her partner ran off with all the money. So she had to start all over again. So Jules White talks about telling your story. And what she says is that when you're talking to somebody, if you want to connect, which is what we all need to do, we need to be good at connecting, we have got to use the power of storytelling, because it's emotion that connects you. So hearing the story and being brought to tears, she connected. And she also talks about the feel-good stuff that happens in your body. So she talks about dopamine, and dopamine is like the James Bond movie. And this is where I age myself again, where he comes over the top skiing, and James Bond comes over, he's escaping and he's skiing, and you don't know what's going to happen, and they pause it to do all the credits and everything, and you think, what's going to happen next? So that's the James Bond, that gives you your dopamine. What's going to happen next? So I do these talks about my mum, because my friend asked me to do a talk about my mum, and I just said, well, she's my mum. And she said, no, you need to talk about it because it's an interesting story. So I go around WIs and Probus and everything, and they say, how much do you charge? And I said, well, I don't, but just give me a donation and it'll go to my Optimist Club. So I do this talk about my mum, and then in the middle of it, I drop in. And of course, at that point, I had my arranged marriage. And at the end of it, they say, will you come back and talk about the arranged marriage? So you're putting that hook in. If only they paid more, I'd be quids in, but they don't. So that's that. But I do enjoy doing the talk. So that's dopamine. The endorphins are the funny, relatable stories, and we've all got those. A few years ago now, when I was working with Isabel Smith, she asked me to speak at a development day. And I'd stayed over the night before, and I was going on stage. And as I was leaving the hotel room, I looked down, and I'd got the most revealing V-neck on my dress. And I bought it specially. And I don't wear stuff like that. I wear things that come up here and come up here. And the reason is that when you're an Indian girl growing up, you do not go in the sunshine, because the blacker you are, the less likely you are to get a good husband. So all my life, I can see a couple of nods, all my life I've been up here, and I looked down at this V-neck and thought, what was I thinking? I can see my bra. I mean, nobody else could. I just realised I'd come back to front. So there's your funny, relatable story. It's not a joke, it's stuff that happens. And then you've got this oxytocin, which is the love and the warmth and that emotion. And this is where Esther Stanhope is somebody else I've linked in with on LinkedIn. She lives in London, actually. I ought to send her along to you. And she worked for the BBC, and she's interviewed David Beckham and Arnold Schwarzenegger and all those people. And she did a session that I heard, and I wrote to her and I said, I think this is brilliant for Sir Optimist. Will you look at what I've done and see if it's okay? Not only did she email me back to say, yeah, I'm glad it was useful, she sent me a book, her book. It's about public speaking, and it's called glossophobia or something, isn't it? When you're afraid of public speaking. And it was signed to Dishu. And I just danced around the house for half a day thinking, she's talked to David Beckham. So I'm now connected to David Beckham because she wrote to me. And next time she meets him, she might say, oh, Tishy got in touch. You know, so she talked about your pitch, you know, how you would put your pitch together. And so apologies for those of you who've heard it before, but it's my best one. So it's on T-E-E-N. So the T is your top line. So this is what you're going to say. You know, we stand up for women is our top line. Standing up for women. So mine is, I'm a Optimist because I get a warm glow. because I also read a book, Happiness by Design, where this guy who wrote it said, so much when we do things and somebody says, wow, you say, oh, it was nothing. Oh, no, it was nothing. Anybody would have done it. No, they wouldn't. There are people, lots of people who don't do anything for humanity or for anybody that's in need. So you're allowed a warm glow. So I say my top line is a warm glow. The next one is the event. And so you talk about what happened. And Chris and I, it's strange that we're on the board together. We keep looking at each other thinking, how did this happen? We were in Lichfield Optimists for 20 years together, but we've now moved away, haven't we? And so Chris very kindly did a sewing bee at her house because it was the project Dress a Girl in Africa. And I'm not a very good sewer, and partly it's because I'm Indian. We don't pin, we don't tack, we don't pattern match. You just use the material in its most efficient way. So I turned up and I thought, well, I'm going to go because I have a fear of missing out. If something's happening, I want to be there. So I turned up. And so I helped make dresses. And then I made this one little dress because I bought 2 squares material and made this little dress. And at the time, a lady in Lichfield who worked with bereaved teenagers got in touch with Chris and said she was going to an orphanage in Burkina Faso and could she take some dresses? Didn't know where Burkina Faso was, but Chris did and said, yes, we'll take the dresses. And then she took the teenagers and they gifted these dresses to the girls in the orphanage. And when they came back, she came back to do a talk and she showed us a photograph. So the next E is the emotion. Right at the front was a little dot of a girl wearing the dress I'd made in Lichfield. And doesn't that make you go, oh, still makes it, the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. So there she was, and it was the first new dress she'd ever had. And then the end bit is, so why wouldn't you become a Optimist if you can make that sort of difference? So you're saying what's next? And I think for me, it is about the stories. And what we do is we tell them back to front. So I listened to a presentation at a region meeting that was absolutely brilliant about the love me not bookmarks. And we've all used them in one guise or another. This group had used them in a particular way. And they went through the process of buying them, you know, doing everything, distributing them and everything. And then right at the end, they said, a lady came back to us and she said, because of that bookmark, I recognized that I was in an abusive relationship and I've left it. There's another one woman. And it's because of a bookmark that Optimists have put together. Now, I would like you to think of your one story. What's the story that you've been part of, or use somebody else's from the hub? Be careful though, because I did the mangroves, and then I tried the crabs, but that didn't go down very well in the pub. They sort of thought it was something else. So be careful how you describe it. Sorry. Board member, have to be careful. Anyway, so if you haven't got your own story, find one that touches you, because the story that touches you is the story that will draw other women to you. And I know I've got friends in the room, people I know, and visited the Corrie project. And that, you know, the project, Chris didn't, yes, you didn't go, did you? We went and visited the project. And when you see Optimist work in action, it just warms your heart. And there are so many projects. This dress story is years old, but it still has that same effect on me. So use something that you've done in the past, tell a story. And it's that story that you tell with emotion that'll get other women to say, well, actually, I want a bit of that. The 2 new clubs are doing very, very well. I go to their meetings, they work at such a pace, I come away with a headache. I get out my Optimist diary and they laugh at me. But, you know, they're doing very, very well. But when we're talking about the right club for the right people, the Leamington Club is a particular style of club. It doesn't suit all women. So next week I've got a meeting to see if I can start a second one. So I've worked with, we have a very, very smart retirement home in Leamington that I'll never afford, but I can go and have a coffee occasionally. They've got 141 dwellings of women, couples and women, and we're going to have an introductory meeting. The general manager is very interested because it's a chain. They've got these all around the place. Now, out of those 141 dwellings, I only need 8 women to say yes. I have 3 I'm taking with me because I've met them somewhere else and said, oh, I think I need to create a club for you. And so if it works there, then I would hope that that company would look at spreading it out. So from my point of view, what I've been trying to do is to challenge myself, put myself in places where I wouldn't normally go through all the embarrassment and trauma of my name and Optimist, you know, nobody knowing what it is. But it's what I've been doing is trying it out. And what I've found is it works. If you get yourself to the right place for women, you will find them. So you've got choirs, you've got business networks, you've got universities, you've got the chamber. All of those places are women who actually want to be part of us, because what they don't have is their link to the United Nations. They don't, whatever charity they do, it just disappears, so they can record it. So just sort of go out and about. Lastly, sorry, I've gone 5 minutes over, I'm sorry. Lastly, I have put a call out for membership, people to Optimists to join my membership team to do what I've done, because I can only do it locally, because I'm in and out of places. You know that know, like, trust? You can't just parachute in and say, be a Optimist and disappear. You have to keep going back. And so I need enthusiastic Optimists to help me in other parts of the country. Now, one of the things I thought that you might worry about is that it seems a lot of work. Actually, I'm working really hard because I'm also a board member. So that takes up some time. I'm also on the Diamond Education Grant Board because as membership director, I'm required to be. I'm very happy to be there. So the membership part fits into your world, your diary. You choose who you're going to meet, where you're going to meet them. But it's building those relationships within your community. So please, please, either yourselves or if there's somebody you know who would like to do this. And of course, we as directors come and go. We're only there temporarily. So we also need, that role would also give Optimists experience that they can take to a director's interview. Because if you're not doing those bigger, like the region roles isn't a requirement, you have to show that you know the totality of what SIGB is and what it stands for. So that would give experience. So thank you for this afternoon. Whoever wrote the program and said I was inspiring, I hope I haven't done too badly, but it's, you know, what I hope you'll hear is that I'm speaking from the heart, because this organization has done so much for me that it was at the point where I said I've got to give something back. And that's what drove me forward. And hopefully when I'm at Edinburgh conference, the numbers won't be too far lower than they were last year, because President Ruth last year said she would have all the directors on stage be held accountable for things. So I'm going to need some really good spin, aren't I, to be able to get away with this one. So thank you ever so much for asking me today. I don't know, are there any questions, Kate?
Any questions?
No.
There was a comment in the chat. She said, you are an inspiration.
Ah, thank
Just
you.
read. Are there any more?
And I'm getting better. Oh,
Yes.
Jill.
It's the last time I heard you speak. You're getting better.
Oh, Jill. I'm a constant learner, a constant learner.
Absolutely.
Yes, just email me. You know, we're all the emails, membership director at sigby.org. Anything at all, please email me. And one of the things we are doing is responding quickly. So make sure that you email me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hang on. We are still losing people. There's more to be done, like you said, but the rate at which we're losing has slowed down, hasn't it?
Yes, yes. So
You know, we're not losing such a high percentage every year.
yes, we did. The standing committee, the current standing committee went through the exit questionnaires from last year. And that's where we get the information that it's our poor behaviour that's driving women away. And so I've tried very, very hard to work on dispute resolution. And what we're suggesting is that if you have an issue, it goes straight to the SIGB dispute team, who are not aligned to the board. They're independent of the board. Because very often, if you have a problem, you've got friends in the club, you've got friends in the region, and you don't know what to do. So what you can do is call them and have a conversation that says, please, can I have some advice? And the exit questionnaire is going to go out end of June, Chris, is when we have the figures we give to SI. And so it'll be interesting for the team to look at whether anything's changed. So we'll report back. I hope it's positive.
Well, yeah.
Yes, so thank you.
Jane, anything from our virtual guests? Mary's question. Yeah. Mary, are you still there?
Yep.
Hi.
Yeah,
I know
hi.
you posed the question to the execs. Do you want to share?
Right. The question was, it's about the modernisation and the motions to conference about constitution. Thames Valley has reviewed the proposals relating to club and regional constitution and will not be putting any amendments forward. But if another club wants us to consider seconding their proposal, please let us know this week. It's very brief, it's very focused, but it's just because this is a very important issue and we do need to be sure that we are happy with the proposals that have been put forward, because after this, there are no alternatives for amendment, opportunities for amendment for a couple of years.
Except voting against, of course.
Yes.
I didn't say that.
Well, but you know, we're a membership organisation. The proposals are there. If you don't like them, vote against them. That's the whole point. Just engage with it and let the board know where you want it to go. So it is important. You know, we're not looking for that nodding, you know, like they used to have